Brothers and sisters, to please join us in the masjid as program is about to begin. Recite another loud salawat. Salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. I begin in the name of Allah, the most beneficent and merciful. All praise belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for blessing us with existence and granting us the opportunity to move towards Him. Respected ulama, my dear brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum. We have gathered here this evening to celebrate the Mubarak occasion, the blessed wiladat of our beloved 11th Imam, Imam Hasan Al Askari alayhi salam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. At this time, I would like to offer my sincere greetings to all my brothers and sisters in Iman, especially the Imam of our time, Imam Al-Hujjah, Imam Mahdi Ajalallahu Ta'ala Farajahum. Salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. I'll start the Jashn by sharing 3 ahadith from our beloved Imam. Imam has narrated that whenever a mighty one gives up the truth, he becomes low. And whenever a low one keeps to it, he becomes mighty. There are 2 qualities such that there is no quality above them: faith in Allah and serving of brothers. Imam also have said, it is from humbleness to greet everyone you pass by, and to sit in other than the distinctive place in a meeting. Subhanallah, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us tawfiq to truly comprehend the lessons which are being taught by our beloved Imam, and may we walk in the path of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam, inshallah. Recite a loud salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. We'll start the Jashn with the recitation of glorious Quran by our young reciter Zaki Lakhani. He will be reciting Surah An-Naba. Please welcome him with a loud salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad.
Salawat.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Assalamu alaikum. Today I'll be reciting Surah An-Naba. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم عما يتساءلون عن النبأ العظيم الذي هم فيه مختلفون كلا سيعلمون ثم كلا سيعلمون ألم نجعل الأرض مهادا والجبال أوتادا وخلقناكم أزواجا وجعلنا نومكم سباتا وجعلنا الليل لباسا وجعلنا النهار معاشا وبنينا فوقكم 7 شدادا وجعلنا سراجا وحاجا وأنزلنا من المعصرات ماء ثجاجا لنخرج به حبا ونباتا وجنات ألفافا إن يوم الفصل كان ميقاتا يوم ينفخ في الصور فتأتون أفواجا وفتحت السماء فكانت أبوابا وسيرت الجبال فكانت سرابا إن جهنم كانت مرصادا للطاغين مآبا لابثين فيها أحقابا لا يذوقون فيها بردا ولا شرابا إلا حميما وغساقا جزاء وفاقا إنهم كانوا لا يرجون حسابا وكذبوا بآياتنا كذابا وكل شيء أحصيناه كتابا فذوقوا فلن نزيدكم إلا عذابا إن للمتقين مفازا حدائق وأعنابا وكواعب أترابا وكأسا دهاقا لا يسمعون فيها لغوا ولا كذابا جزاء من ربك عطاء حسابا رب السماوات والأرض وما بينهما الرحمن لا يملكون منه خطابا يوم يقوم الروح والملائكة صفا لا يتكلمون إلا من أذن له الرحمن وقال صوابا ذلك اليوم الحق فمن شاء اتخذ إلى ربه مآبا إنا أنذرناكم عذابا قريبا يوم ينظر المرء ما قدمت يداه ويقول الكافر يا ليتني كنت ترابا صدق الله العلي العظيم.
MashaAllah, beautiful recitation of glorious Quran by our young reciter Zaki Lakhani. For continued blessings in his life, please recite a loud salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Next up, we'll have a recitation of Mankabat by Brother Shafkat Shah in the honor of Ahl Bayt. Please welcome him with a loud salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Salawat. मनकबत इमाम हसन अस्करी की शान में एक दफ़ा और सलवात पढ़िएगा. न खुसरवी के लिए है न अफसरी के लिए न खुसरवी के लिए है न अफसरी के लिए ज़ुबान बाकी है बस मद है अस्करी के लिए न खुसरवी के लिए है न अफसरी के लिए अगर न मिल ملتی انہیں نور عسکری کی زکات، اگر نہ ملتی انہیں نور عسکری کی زکات، ترستے چاند ستارے بھی روشنی کے لیے، گرایا آپ کا روزہ جنہوں نے اے مولا، گرایا آپ کا روزہ جنہوں نے اے مولا، شکار پہلا بنیں گے وہ آخری کے لیے، امام پھر سے بلائے مجھے بھی سامارا، امام پھر سے بلائے مجھے بھی سامارا، ترس رہی ہے جبیں کب سے بندگی کے لیے، میرے امام کا ہمسر وہ کیسے لاتے بھلا، میرے امام کا ہمسر وہ کیسے لاتے بھلا، ملا نہ جب کوئی کمبر کی ہمسری کے لیے، ملا نہ جب کوئی کمبر کی ہمسری کے لیے، یہ بولے دار پہ میسم میں کیسے رک جاؤں، یہ بولے دار پہ میسم میں کیسے رک جاؤں، زباں ملی ہے مجھے جب علی علی کے لیے، نہ خسروی کے لیے ہے نہ افسری کے لیے، زبان باقی ہے بس مدح عسکری کے لیے، صلوات پر محمد علیہ وسلم۔ عطا ان کی وراثت ہے، سخا ان کی وراثت ہے، عطا ان کی وراثت ہے، سخا ان کی وراثت ہے۔ علی کے ہیں یہ گھر والے، وفا ان کی وراثت ہے، عطا ان کی وراثت ہے، سخا ان کی وراثت ہے۔ یہ وہ ہیں جو کبھی ظالم سے بھی بدلہ نہیں لیتے، یہ وہ ہیں جو کبھی ظالم سے بھی بدلہ نہیں لیتے، کرم ان کی وراثت ہے، دعا ان کی وراثت ہے۔ علی کے ہیں یہ گھر والے، وفا ان کی وراثت ہے۔ یہ شب ہے خادماؤں کی، سویرا ان کا نوکر ہے، یہ شب ہے خادماؤں کی، سویرا ان کا نوکر ہے، یہ جب چاہیں اثر کر دے، ضیاء ان کی وراثت ہے۔ وہ ہستی ہو ختیجہ کی، وہ زہرا ہو کہ زینب ہو، وہ ہستی ہو ختیجہ کی، وہ زہرا ہو کہ زینب ہو، گواہ قدسی ہے لوگو، حیا ان کی وراثت ہے۔ علی کے ہیں گھر والے، وفا ان کی وراثت ہے۔ پڑھو تطہیر کی آیت، تمہیں معلوم پھر ہوگا، پڑھو تطہیر کی آیت، تمہیں معلوم پھر ہوگا، ڈھلی ہے جو طہارت میں، ردا ان کی وراثت ہے۔ نہیں تم جانتے حاکم کہ کیا جاگیر ہے ان کی، نہیں تم جانتے حاکم کہ کیا جاگیر ہے ان کی، सितारे हैं गवाह अर्ज़ो समा उनकी विरासत है। अली के हैं ये घर वाले वफा उनकी विरासत है। सलवात पर मोहम्मद
Jazakallah Shafqat Bhai for his sehat, salamti, barakat in this life and hereafter. Please recite aloud salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Brothers and sisters, I'm sure you're aware of the suffering and the situation taking place in Gaza. In light of that, we have a short presentation for you. So if I can have your attention to the screen just for a few minutes. Recite a salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. As heart-wrenching and difficult to see this video is, I'm sure it doesn't begin to do justice of the suffering which is taking place in Palestine at the moment. Due to this unprecedented suffering that is currently taking place in Gaza, Baitul Ilm Relief Committee is coordinating a fundraising effort to help those in desperate need. This is being done under the supervision of Sheikh Faizi. Baitul Ilm is working to partner with a reputable aid agency that we will get food, water, and medical supplies to the suffering people of Gaza. Please support this effort generously as much as possible. We are requesting monetary donations for this effort to be paid via check made payable to Imami with Palestine Relief written at the memo, or cash donations. Any participation in this noble cause will be greatly appreciated. In the same light, Mahdi Youth is also holding a presentation tomorrow. It's a fundraiser tomorrow taking place at 8 p.m. Participants are required to pay $15 entry fee. There will be a paint event. I'm not exactly sure what they are doing in this event, but for further details, please contact Brother Saad Khawri. The age limit to participate in this event is 10 years and older. If you're interested or to register, please email mahdiyouth@baitulilm.org. Recite a salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Tonight's Jashn is being sponsored by the family of Sister Dr. Yasmin Hussain. For her sehat, salamti and barakat, please recite a loud salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. She has requested that we recite Surah Fatiha for all her family's marhumin. especially for Marhuma Bakhtawar Begum, Imtiaz Begum, Naseem Bano, Nazir Hussain, Munir Hussain, Tanveer Hussain, Nasir Hussain, Zamir Hussain, Azhar Hussain, Shaukat Ali, Farat Ali, Qasim Ali and Asif Ali, and for all of your marhumin as well. Please recite Surah Fatiha preceded by a loud salawat. Salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Bismillah. Now, without further ado, I would like to request Hujjatul Islam, Maulana Reza Hemyari, to please come forward and address the community. Please welcome him with the loud salawat.
Actually, thank you. صلوا على محمد وعلى محمد. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وبه نستعين إنه خير ناصر ومعين. ثم الصلاة والسلام والتحية والإكرام على سيدنا ونبينا أبي القاسم محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين سيما بقية الله في الأراضين وحجته على الخلق أجمعين واللعنة الدائمة على أعدائهم من الآن إلى يوم الدين. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. أما بعد، فقد قال الله الحكيم في محكم كتابه الكريم: أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم ونريد أن نمن على الذين استضعفوا في الأرض ونجعلهم أئمة ونجعلهم الوارثين. صدق الله العلي العظيم. Dear brothers and sisters in Iman, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My congratulations to all of you on this very blessed event, the birth anniversary of our 11th Imam, Imam Hasan ibn Ali Al Askari alayhi salam. And in particular, my congratulations to the Imam of our time, his very son, Al-Hujjat ibn Hasan Al Askari, the Imam of our time and the awaited Savior and the promise that Allah has made to all of humankind. These are difficult times to be celebrating. These are times in which, just on the very phones that we carry in our pockets, the screens that we look at throughout the day and the night, we see death, we see destruction, we see even little children, babies, who are killed with absolute ruthlessness. And some of these scenes and some of these events really sit very deeply in our hearts, not just because they are occurring to our fellow Muslims, but as well because they are occurring upon an oppressed people that have had this oppression upon them for over 100 years. Allah commands us to fight for and to work for and to lift up any oppressed people wherever they might be on His earth. We, as the representatives of His Prophet, Muhammad al-Mustafa sallallahu alayhi wa alih, who was a rahmah not just for the Muslimin, but he was a rahmah, as Allah Himself says, lil alameen, for all of the worlds. We as Muslims should feel in our hearts that sadness and that tragedy that befalls any oppressed people throughout the world. And this is one very important lesson that we get from the Quran itself, when Allah talks about the mustad'afun. In Surah Al-Qasas, the ayah that I began my talk with, Allah in ayah number 5, He says, وَنُرِيدُ أَن نَمُنَّ عَلَى الَّذِينَ اسْتُضْعِفُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ وَنَجْعَلَهُمْ أَئِمَّةً وَنَجْعَلَهُمُ الْوَارِثِينَ. We wanted to give a blessing to those people who were oppressed in the land. And we want to make them leaders, and we want to make them heirs and inheritors of Allah's land. So Allah has promised those who are oppressed, in whatever time they might find themselves in whatever country or in whatever land they might be living in, and whatever community they are placed within, Allah has promised them that He is going to make them leaders and He is going to allow them to inherit His land. What's interesting about these verses, these are verses of Surah Al-Qasas, ayah number 5. Of course, as the school of the Ahlul Bayt, we know that this promise of Allah is going to be fulfilled by His very hujjah. And so according to our ahadith, we know that this al-mustad'afun are going to be lifted up by that Imam of our time, the awaited Savior that Allah has promised to all communities. But what's interesting about these verses, ayah number 5 of Surah Al-Qasas, is that Allah gives the context of the Banu Israel, the Jewish tribes. It's ayah number 5 of Surah Al-Qasas. Ayah number 4, Allah says, and before that as well, ayah number 3, Allah tells the prophets that I'm going to tell you the story of Musa and his people. And then in ayah number 4, Allah mentions, Inna Fir'auna ala fil ard wa ja'ala ahlaha shi'an yastad'ifu ta'ifatan minhum yudhabbihu abna'ahum wa yastahi nisa'ahum innahu kana minal mufsidin. That Pharaoh, the Pharaoh of Egypt, he has become haughty and he has tried to overtake the land and make its people into different factions. And then one of the wiles and one of the aims of Pharaoh, one of the crimes that he committed, is that he splintered the people of the land into different factions, and then he oppressed one of them, one of those factions. And this is one of the claims of Pharaoh that you can find in different verses of the Quran. This is his own stated claim. يُذَبِّحُ أَبْنَاءَهُم. Allah mentions this as the crime of Pharaoh. He killed their sons. وَيَسْتَحْيِي نِسَاءَهُم. And he allowed their womenfolk to live so that he can place them within servitude. In other words, whatever means of oppression Pharaoh could think of, he enacted. He would kill recklessly, and we've heard some of these stories. Cutting open a woman's womb to kill the child within. Executing even very little children, not to mention the men and those who could fight back. And then it said that he let the womenfolk live so that he could imprison and enslave them as well. Innahu kana minal mufsidin. He was one of those who was corrupt, and he spread this corruption in the land. But one of the things that Allah mentions throughout the Quran is that when times are difficult, when it seems like darkness has enveloped the land, then Allah gives His hope and He fulfills His promise. وَنُرِيدُ أَن نَمُنَّ. And then Allah mentions this verse of hope. Of hope. That He has a promise that He will fulfill. وَنُرِيدُ أَن نَمُنَّ عَلَى الَّذِينَ اسْتُضْعِفُوا. And we wanted to make those who have been oppressed, we wanted to give them this favor. وَنَجْعَلَهُمْ أَئِمَّةً وَنَجْعَلَهُمُ الْوَارِثِينَ. We will fulfill our promise. Despite all of your leaders not just keeping the status quo, but aiding and abetting the oppression and in fact being the first and the greatest oppressors of the land themselves. Now we are here to mention and to celebrate the life of our 11th Imam, and we will get to that. But before we get to that point, I want to just mention this connection between this verse and our day. We talk about our leadership, the leaders of our own land. That was with Pharaoh. Now we think about the leadership of our own land. Leaders throughout the globe, this international community as it is called, many of which don't even talk about ceasefire, can't even bring those words to their mouths. And not just that, the leaders of our own land are aiding and abetting and furthering the destruction and the oppression of the people of Gaza. We just saw some of those images. And it mentioned only 5,000 people who have been killed. The statistics today are much higher. Thousands and thousands of people killed, and then thousands and thousands of people who will have to pick up the rubble and what is left of their lives. Gaza did not start in October of 2023. The suffering and the oppression of Gaza, it began many, many years ago. Most of the inhabitants of that land, of Gaza itself, are refugees, not of 30 years ago, of 40 years ago, of 50 years ago. But they are the first refugees of 1948. So most of these people that are being killed today have lived generation after generation as refugees who have been kicked out of their own homeland, of their own homes and what is familiar to them. 2.3 million people. One thing though, that again we have to take heart in. We see these crises, and these crises are not few in number. But we see these crises, and instead of losing heart, we have to try to analyze what these crises tell us about the rest of our lives. Sometimes we look at a crisis and we say, Ya Allah, help us in this moment. Help us overcome this crisis. Let's ask for a ceasefire. And of course, it should not just be a ceasefire, but it should be an end to all hostilities. Of course, that's one thing that we have to ask from any one of our leaders and our representatives. But the ceasefire is not the solution to this problem. The crisis, it only reminds us of the oppression that has been going on for years and years, generation after generation. Before this recent crisis, how many people were killed in the West Bank? How many people were starved of the basic necessities of life in Gaza? Of water, of food, of electricity. Why is it that Gaza has to get its electricity from an external source, even though Gaza supposedly has its own power plant? Because that power plant was destroyed in the previous hostilities. Because all of the water purification plants in Gaza were destroyed. And so that's why Gaza cannot even sustain itself. Those are the conditions that were there before these most recent hostilities. In other words, crisis moments of crisis, allow us to see what was happening even before those moments came about. They see the rot that was already taking place. Now this rot is just coming to the surface, and we have to deal with it. We can't turn away from it anymore. One of the crises that have been lingering is this crisis of this moral superiority that we in the West sometimes think we have. We say we care about human rights, we care about international law, we set these laws in place, and so we will hold ourselves to account and we'll hold everyone else to account. But then when someone or some country that we support, when they break those laws, then we don't say a word. When it comes to the human rights of an oppressed people in Gaza or in Palestine, we don't even think about their human rights. Our leaders don't even mention that those people have a human rights to begin with. So the rot begins from above and then it goes throughout the rest of society. A society which has become numb to the oppression that is seeping throughout the land. And that is one thing that we can take a lesson from the life and the actions of our Ahlul Bayt. In particular, when we look at the life of our 11th Imam, Imam Hasan Al Askari alayhi salam. As we all know, Imam Hasan Al Askari was the 11th Imam, the Imam whose son was going to be and is the Imam of our time, and that awaited Savior for all of humanity. And I'd just like to spend the few moments that we have together to think about what were the ways in which Imam Hasan Al Askari prepared his Shia. And through his Shia, he prepared the entire Muslim Ummah to not just await that final promise, that promise to lift up those oppressed in the land and make them leaders and heirs of Allah's creation, but as well make them actively yearn for and do this practice of intidhar for that final promise to be fulfilled. What were those ways in which the Imam prepared his Shia for intidhar? One of those ways, of course, is something that we understand and we maybe even sometimes think of it as a ritual in our own lives. We say intidharul faraj. We do dua. We maybe even sometimes will separate a certain day of our week, a certain time throughout that day for us to do dua for intidharul faraj. For example, we might do dua on Friday mornings, or we might do other different types of ritual acts. And this is one of our requirements. It is a requirement that we know and we learn from the words of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wa alih, up until the time of Imam Hasan Al Askari himself, according to one of the reports, by the second representative, the second direct representative of Imam Al-Hujjah alayhi salam, a man by the name of Muhammad ibn Uthman al-Amri. It is said that one day, this Muhammad ibn Uthman, he comes to the Imam Hasan al-Askari, and he is talking to him, and he is saying to him, I have heard from your forefathers that if a person does not know the Imam of his time, and if that person dies, Man mata wa lam ya'rif imam zamaneh, mata mitatan jahiliyyah. A person who does not know the Imam of his time, and then he dies with that lack of knowledge, with that ignorance, then he has died almost as though he has lived in the time of Jahiliyyah, before Islam came and was spread throughout the land. And then he also says, and I have heard that this land, this earth, will not be left empty without one of the hujaj of God, one of those proofs and those connections of God. In other words, in those times of difficulty, Allah has not forsaken us. When a hujjah, in other words, is a connection between human beings and humankind and Allah. Not just in the lessons that we can learn from the hujjah, but as well the blessings that the very existence of that hujjah brings to Allah's creation. By the very existence of a hujjah, Allah sends His blessings. There is a connection for the angels to come now and to speak to human beings. That hujjah has both what is present and what is absent from our eyes. Allah will present His blessings to human beings. The Imam Hasan Al Askari, he tells this particular representative of himself and of his son. He says, yes, all of those words are correct. It is true that if a person dies without knowing the Imam of his time, then he has died the death of Jahiliyyah. But one thing you have to keep in mind, there is going to be a ghaiba, there's going to be a disappearance for this hujjah. That's people who are ignorant and people who lose faith and who don't have that hope, they are going to be in a state of utter unease and they're going to be in a state of confusion. People who can't connect themselves to Allah through His hujjah, they're not going to have any place to get that hope from. And there are going to be people who are going to deny, and they're going to say that Allah indeed has forsaken His creation. And even those people are going to perish. Ultimately, the Imam Hasan Al Askari, he says, your responsibility is to await that final hujjah of Allah, and then in fact he shows this Muhammad ibn Uthman and his father rather, he shows him the hujjah of his time. Sallu ala Muhammad wa Muhammad. But this is usually when we talk about intidar al-faraj. We usually talk about it a lot of times in terms of our knowledge, my personal knowledge of the Imam. Or we talk about it in terms of the amount of dua that I do for the Imam. But one of the things that Imam Hasan Al Askari, and in fact was begun by his father, Imam Ali Al Hadi, the 10th Imam, was to Sallu ala Muhammad wa Muhammad. Was to create a community of intidar. A society and a Shia, not just as individual members, but as an entire community who will come together and who will work together to create a better society. A society that now, as a whole, can come and do that intidar, can prepare the ground for that intidar. Because ultimately the Imam is going to come and he is going to lift the oppressed, not just as individuals, but as a collective. And that's one thing that we sometimes lose sight of. When we think about the condition of the Shia during the time of the Ahlul Bayt, we can't just think of individuals who were oppressed, but we have to think about an entire community that was time and again targeted for what it represented. You talk about the Abbasids. When you look in Abbasid history, I mentioned, it's not just the individuals who are committing that oppression, but sometimes it's the leaders who are aiding and abetting and furthering the oppression of a people. When we think about the Abbasids presented themselves as the most moral and the most upright individuals who are now going to come and do away with the Umayyads. Muawiyah, Yazid, all of these people, they were oppressors. We Abbasids, we are going to lift up the oppressed. We Abbasids, we are going to now come and lift up even the family of the Prophet. Ar-Ridha min Ali Muhammad was their motto. The chosen one from the family of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. That was their claim to fame. If you look at, just very quickly, if you look at the names that the Abbasids chose for themselves, you have people like Al-Mansur, the one who was aided. By who? By Allah. Al-Mahdi, person who is guided. And Al-Mahdi is not just someone who is guided, but he is that promised and awaited Savior. The Abbasids, in other words, they presented themselves as the awaited saviors of the entire Muslim Ummah. Person who was in charge and at the seat of Khilafat during the time of the 10th Imam, Al-Mutawakkil, the person who has tawakkul, has trust in Allah. This Al-Mutawakkil, his reign was first of all a reign of terror, as was common amongst the Abbasids. It was a reign in which time and again the Shia of the Ahlul Bayt were targeted and they were killed. And one of the greatest and gravest crimes of Al-Mutawakkil, it is said that he was a person who razed and destroyed the haram of Abu Abdullah al-Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. Why? Because the place and the burial ground, the haram of Imam Hussein, was a source of courage, of hope, of resistance against tyranny, against oppression. And so that they can do away with that symbol of courage and that symbol against tyranny, the Abbasids, and in particular Al-Mutawakkil, he comes and destroys Karbala. He destroys the haram of Imam Hussein. And it's not just a destruction. It's a destruction where it completely obliterates any trace of that haram. And so when people want to go to do ziyarat, they have to figure out, is this the place, or maybe the place is over there? Is this where Imam Hussein is buried, or maybe is it over there? This was the project of the Abbasids. But what's interesting and what's amazing, particularly for the Shia of the Ahlul Bayt, and this is under the guidance and the direction of the Imams, they time and again would tell their Shia where to get their hope from. Until a point comes when we say the Abbasids, they had a huge government and this whole bureaucracy underneath their control. One of those advisors of the Abbasids, a man by the name of Ahmad ibn Ubaidullah ibn Khaqan, a person who was an advisor of the Abbasids and was a part of a family of advisors for the Abbasids. His father, Ubaidullah ibn Khaqan. It is said that one day, this man, he is confronted by the son of the 10th Imam, a man by the name of Ja'far. Sometimes we call him Ja'far al-Kadhab. This Ja'far wanted to usurp the imamat after his brother, Imam Hasan Al Askari, passed away. And so he comes to the Abbasids, in particular this advisor and his father, and he says that I want you to make me, I want you to appoint me as the next Imam. What's interesting is the response of this Abbasid advisor, this vizier of the Abbasids. He says, how I don't want to say the word, but how little intelligence you have, how silly of a person you are. My father and the entire structure of the Abbasids, the Sultan himself, has tried to kill and target individual Shia, and has tried to destroy and defame the entire reputation of this imamate. But he couldn't succeed. And not only that, whenever one of these Shia were killed, whenever one of these followers of the Ahlul Bayt were killed, it seems like they got some courage and their numbers multiplied. Which way, we don't know. We tried to change the imamate and to deplete the reputation of the imams. Imam Ali al-Hadi was taken from his home in the city of Medina, and he was brought to a far distant city, an army barracks by the name of Samarra, that was created solely for the Abbasid Khalifa and for his army, taking him away from his followers, cutting off connection from anyone who would support him. In other words, a full embargo. And yet, even despite all of these practices, we see that their numbers are increasing. Their support for the Ahlul Bayt increases over time. If it was up to us, as the leaders and as those in power, then all of the things that we've done would have borne fruit. But whatever we do, it gets the opposite result. And so he says, you think that I can actually determine who the next imam is going to be? He even says, one time I saw my own father. It was a very strange event. I saw him, the vizier of the Abbasids, the prime minister of the Abbasid court. He says, I saw him one day in a majlis. He enters and he sits at the head of the majlis. And then I see, there's different people coming in. Then all of a sudden, I see one individual come in. My father did not stand up for anyone except for the Khalifa himself. He was the head vizier. But then I see this man come in. And I don't know who it was. My father, he stands up. Not only does he go and pay his respects, but he pays his respects in a way that I have never seen before. And he even offers this man his own seat. Something that he wouldn't have done for just a normal or a regular person. Later on, I asked my father, who was this person? He says, this was the heir of Rasulullah himself. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. This is the heir of Al-Rida, the 8th Imam. This is Hasan Al Askari. This is the representative of Allah himself. A person who is the vizier of the Abbasids. A person whose entire goal is to suppress the reputation and the power of the Imams. This person is now being fully respected and given the honors from the Abbasid vizier himself. One of the aims and one of the missions of the Ahlul Bayt was to tell the Shia that you have to unite as a community. And this actually starts with the 6th Imam, Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq. I want to just mention 3 ways that the Imams created a unified and a whole community that can weather the storm of the ghaiba, of the disappearance of their single source of guidance towards Allah. The first actually starts with Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq. It is said that Imam Hasan Al Askari in Tafsir, a book of commentary of the Quran that is attributed to him, it is said that the Imam, he is asked, what is this ayah of the Quran, Surah Al-Baqarah, ayah number 79? Person asks the Imam, فَوَيْلٌ لِلَّذِينَ يَكْتُبُونَ الْكِتَابَ بِأَيْدِيهِمْ ثُمَّ يَقُولُونَ هَذَا مِنْ عِنْدِ اللَّهِ. Woe upon those who write the book or they write a book with their own hands, and then they attribute this to Allah Himself. In other words, there are people who distort and take away the guidance of the people. This is Imam Hasan Al Askari reporting from his forefather, Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq alayhi salam. And this person is smart. He says, it's not just people of a time long ago. Does this apply to the Muslims themselves? In other words, if the Muslims were to write a book and to call it the Book of God, will they be eligible for this woe of Allah, this damnation and this curse of Allah Himself? The Imam says this is referring to the Banu Israel, people of the Jewish tribes. They would write and they would distort the words of God. But it's not just, and sometimes we think about distorting the book of God, about thinking about, for example, hiding the Torah and then writing a different kitab. Rather, what the Imam says is that these people, they knew that they're scholars. The Banu Israel. If their leaders are a problem, then why is Allah condemning the entire community? The leaders might do something, but why is it that I am condemned as well? The Imam says, because the people of Banu Israel, they knew that their leaders and their scholars were people who would lie, and people who would cheat, and people who had loyalty and this sense of tribalism only to themselves. وَكَذَلِكَ عَوَامُنَا. And if our people, they follow their leaders and their scholars, even though they know that their scholars and their leaders have the same vices within themselves, and they lie and they cheat, and they're only loyal to themselves, then Allah will damn them as well. In other words, the Imam says, what you have to look for in leaders that bring together a community, that tell you and teach you about the revelation of Allah, you have to look for particular characteristics. And that's when the Imam says these famous lines. فَأَمَّا مَنْ كَانَ مِنَ الْفُقَهَاءِ صَائِنًا لِنَفْسِهِ. In other words, the head of our community, they have to be fuqaha, they have to be scholars, people who are immersed in the knowledge and think deeply about the revelation of Allah. These people don't just have to know, but they have to protect themselves. حَافِظًا لَدِينِهِ. The people that you have to look to, they have to preserve and protect their religion and their obedience of Allah. مُخَالِفًا عَلَى هَوَاهِ. They have to go against their own individual desires. مُطِيعًا لِأَمْرِ مَوْلَاهِ. And they have to follow the commands of their Mawla. فَلِلْعَوَامِ. Once you have that, once you found those leaders, then it is the responsibility of the rest of the community to come and follow them. فَلِلْعَوَامِ أَن يُقَلِّدُوا. So the first step is that the Imams gave their Shia and the entire community people to look up to and people to follow when the Imam is taken away. Starting from the time of Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq, these were the people that the Shia will go to whenever they had a question. And these people become the source of that identity and of that unity for the Shia. That's the first thing. The second thing is that the Imams, as I mentioned, the Imams were taken away from their Shia. They were hidden away by the Abbasids, starting from Imam Ali al-Hadi and then continuing with Imam Hasan Al Askari. Complete cut off of communication. And so the Imams, they told their Shia to rely on these individuals within your own communities. Sometimes the Imam would tell them, for example, that this is the person that you have to go and ask the question about. This is the person that you have to take your mission from. And then finally, so one is to set the values and the virtues that we have to look for in our leaders. Second, whenever a person has questions, to refer to, not for the Imam to answer that question himself, but he would refer his Shia to those individuals within their own communities and within their own lands. And these are not just lands that we think about. Sometimes we think about communicating with our maraja. We just send them a text, right? However far away they might be. The Imams, they were cut off even to the extent that they couldn't send a letter to an individual. And so he would tell them, go to the local leadership. And finally, he tried the Imam Hasan Al Askari, and again, in the path of his father as well, he would make his own, these individual communities, whether they are in Nishapur, or they are in Medina, or they are in Kufa, or they are in Qom. Wherever they might find themselves, he would make them financially independent. He would tell them that if you want to give your khums, for example, go and give it to this individual. And he will distribute it as he sees fit, because he has my approval. If you want to give your finances, go and give it to this person. And then he would also hold that person to account. And he began, the Imams, one of the greatest blessings that we have from them is that he would make those individuals both responsible and individually make their own decisions on their own. And so this is something that we can take as a lesson for ourselves in this day and age. First of all, we think about intidhar, not just as an individual responsibility, but as a collective responsibility. We think about what are the institutions that we are setting in place for our community so that we can prepare the path for our Imam. Do we identify ourselves as Shia, as an individual, or do I identify myself as a part of a larger community? And then what are the means and what are the things that I do to strengthen my community? And I will end with this final hadith of our Imam. He says, and this is in particular when we think about what is the steps that we take to strengthen the bonds between our communities and our fellow brothers and sisters in Iman. It begins by that individual connection. The Imam, in one of his sayings, Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad, in one of the beautiful sayings of the Imam, he says, "Man wa'adha akhahu sirran, faqad zanahu, wa man wa'adahu alaniyatan, faqad shanahu." This is a beautiful saying, not just for the words of the Imam, but as well because of this context. We're thinking about creating a better community, first of all in terms of my individual relationship with my brother or sister in Iman. That's the first step. And then we can work up towards a better and a larger whole. He says, a person who gives admonition, who tells his brother or sister, this is where you have done wrong and this is how you can correct it. But that relationship is one of care. It is one of compassion. It is also one of courage, because sometimes it takes a lot of courage to tell my brother that you have done this thing wrong, right? But it's also one of compassion. A person who advises and admonishes his brother, but he does it sirran, not doing away and destroying the reputation of his brother, but he does it quietly. He does it in privacy. فَقَدْ زَانَهُ. He has adorned that brother of his. وَمَنْ وَعَدَهُ عَلَانِيَةً فَقَدْ شَانَهُ. A person who now comes and admonishes his brother. Again, the same care, the same courage, but he's not thinking about the reputation of my brother or sister in Iman. He admonishes him and he advises him out in public. فَقَدْ شَانَهُ. He has brought him disgrace. And so now we're thinking about this intidarul faraj as that final promise for us to ask Allah to fulfill His final promise. And I will end with this dua. We ask Allah to fulfill that final promise that He has promised all of humankind, to lift up the oppressed, to create a just and peaceful world, and to allow us to reconnect to His final hujjah. We ask Allah to allow us to understand better and to enact better the teachings of the Ahlul Bayt, both on an individual level, but also on a level of a community. O Allah, allow us to create those stronger bonds within our communities, amongst our brothers and sisters in Iman. And O Allah, allow all of us as a collective to prepare the path for the reappearance of your final Imam, Al-Hujjat ibn Hasan Al Askari. And I will have this as my final dua. O Allah, forgive and raise the ranks of all of the shuhada throughout the world, all of those who have been oppressed and who have been killed and who have been tragically wounded, not just physically, but as well spiritually throughout the world. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, wa sallallahu ala Muhammad wa alihi tahirin. Do you want to do this? Okay. Do ziyarat waris? Okay.
The sister will stand up for ziyarat waris, inshallah, and I'll conclude the program.
Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Did you want to put the...
You can just go without the slide today.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم السلام عليك يا وارث آدم صفوة الله السلام عليك يا وارث نوح نبي الله السلام عليك يا وارث إبراهيم خليل الله السلام عليك يا وارث موسى كليم الله السلام عليك يا وارث عيسى روح الله السلام عليك يا وارث محمد حبيب الله السلام عليك يا وارث أمير المؤمنين عليه السلام السلام عليك يا ابن محمد المصطفى السلام عليك يا ابن علي المرتضى السلام عليك يا ابن فاطمة الزهراء السلام عليك يا ابن خديجة الكبرى السلام عليك يا ثار الله وابن ثاره والوتر الموتور أشهد أنك قد أقمت الصلاة وآتيت الزكاة وأمرت بالمعروف ونهيت عن المنكر وأطعت الله ورسوله حتى أتاك اليقين فلعن الله أمة قتلتك ولعن الله أمة ظلمتك ولعن الله أمة سمعت بذلك فرضيت به يا مولاي يا أبا عبد الله أشهد أنك كنت نورا في الأصلاب الشامخة والأرحام المطهرة لم تنجسك الجاهلية بأنجاسها ولم تلبسك من مدلهمات ثيابها وأشهد أنك من دعائم الدين وأركان المؤمنين وأشهد أنك الإمام البر التقي الرذي الزكي الهادي المهدي وأشهد أن الأئمة من ولدك كلمة التقوى وأعلام الهدى والعروة الوثقى والحجة على أهل الدنيا وأشهد الله وملائكته وأنبياءه ورسله أني بكم مؤمن وبي بكم موقن بشرائع ديني وخواتيم عملي وقلبي لقلبكم سلم وأمري لأمركم متبع. صلوات الله عليكم وعلى أرواحكم وعلى أجسادكم وعلى أجسامكم وعلى شاهدكم وعلى غائبكم وعلى ظاهركم وعلى باطنكم. زيارة علي بن الحسين عليهما السلام. السلام عليك يا ابن رسول الله، السلام عليك يا ابن نبي الله، السلام عليك يا ابن أمير المؤمنين، السلام عليك يا ابن الحسين الشهيد، السلام عليك أيها الشهيد، السلام عليك أيها المظلوم وابن المظلوم. لعن الله أمة قتلتك، ولعن الله أمة ظلمتك، ولعن الله أمة سمعت بذلك فرضيت به. زيارة of the rest of the shuhada. السلام عليكم يا أولياء الله وأحباءه، السلام عليكم يا أصفياء الله وأوداءه، السلام عليكم يا أنصار دين الله، السلام عليكم يا أنصار رسول الله، السلام عليكم يا أنصار أمير المؤمنين، السلام عليكم يا أنصار فاطمة سيدة نساء العالمين، السلام عليكم يا أنصار أبي محمد الحسن بن علي الولي الناصح، السلام عليكم يا أنصار أبي عبد الله. بأبي أنتم وأمي طبتم وطابت الأرض التي فيها دفنتم وفزتم فوزا عظيما، فيا ليتني كنت معكم فأفوز معكم. زيارة عباس بن علي. السلام عليكم يا أبا الفضل العباس ابن أمير المؤمنين، السلام عليك يا ابن سيد الوصيين، السلام عليك يا ابن أول القوم إسلاما وأقدمهم إيمانا وأقومهم بدين الله وأحوطهم على الإسلام. أشهد لقد نصحت لله ولرسوله ولأخيك، فنعم الأخ المواسي. فلعن الله أمة قتلتك، ولعن الله أمة ظلمتك، ولعن الله أمة استحلت منك المحارم وانتهكت حرمة الإسلام. فنعم الصابر المجاهد المحامي الناصر والأخ الدافع عن أخيه المجيب إلى طاعة ربه الراغب فيما زهد فيه غيره من الثواب الجزيل والثناء الجميل. والحقك الله بدرجة آبائك في جنات النعيم. اللهم أنت السلام ومنك السلام ولك السلام وإليك يعود السلام. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون، والسلام على المرسلين، والحمد لله رب العالمين. السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام على الأئمة الهادين المهديين. السلام على جميع أنبياء الله ورسله وملائكته. السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين. السلام على علي أمير المؤمنين. السلام على فاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين. السلام على الحسن والحسين سيدي شباب أهل الجنة أجمعين. السلام على 9 المعصومين من ذرية الحسين. السلام على الحجة بن الحسن القائم المهدي، عجل الله تعالى فرجه وسهل الله مخرجك وجعلنا من أعوانك وأنصارك وشيعتك والمستشهدين بين يديك. السلام عليكم جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته.